We're here with Trek Talk, your internet source for the offbeat, fan-based news you crave about the Star Trek series.
Beaming you behind-the-scenes facts, expert opinions, and fascinating ideas about the planet's most renowned science fiction show.
Our first episode, we went to an LA sci-fi convention and were lucky enough to speak with Star Trek archivist and author Larry Nemecek about why the original series struck such a nerve with humanoids.
The worldview of the time, people were worried about Vietnam, all the different social movements were coming up again, the green, environmental awareness was just exploding. Rachel Carson had just come out. Earth Day was 1970, the first Earth Day, so that was the year after Star Trek went off. So all that was building up, and people were concerned about nuclear war and whether the species would survive, and overpopulation was a big social issue. And all these, the 60s, and we had so much social turmoil with the assassinations, and people were just really wondering about, geez, was surviving World War II not enough? Are we going to find new ways to rip ourselves apart? And, a lot of the old, gee whiz, let's go 50s kind of sci-fi, and some of it was maybe a little on the cheesy side, but the part of the going into the future and embracing the future in whatever our science level of understanding and being able to project what that would look like, that's always been a factor, but a lot of what was woven into what Gene wanted to do was even on two levels there. One was be positive about the future. He was tired of dystopian, views of the future. And as the 60s wore on, a lot of that pessimism from some quarters in life was wearing on, and he thought people needed something else. And he also wanted to just tell sophisticated stories. He'd been a head writer on Have Gun Will Travel, which was a Western, and all the Westerns, the Oaters, O-A-T-E-R-S, when like 3/4 of the shows on TV were Westerns, like today they're police procedurals and reality shows. And he was trying to tell intelligent stories with that framework. And he had one series he got to show for one season called The Lieutenant, where it was about a military judge advocate general. And he was trying to talk about modern issues through that lens. And after 2 or 3 times of being censored, he'd also had the idea, because he had loved Jonathan Swift and Gulliver's Travels and several different kinds of fantasy, science fiction genre type things. He decided that science fiction was the way to get around stupid censors and tell those stories, kind of the way Rod Serling was doing with Twilight Zone, only instead of an anthology, it would be regular characters. And you could have a little bit of the whiz-bang, gee-whiz, let's go to space. And if you had the purple people and the green people talking about racism, it wasn't like having a black guy and a white guy, So it wasn't so on the nose, and you might be able to do that. So that was all the cauldron of the 60s. And a lot of people saw Star Trek and saw the guy with the pointed ears and the painted people and its kids and spaceships, and went, okay, it's a kiddie show. But if you took the time to watch it, you went, oh my God, this is not a kiddie show. And it was almost as much as what was implied as what was on the nose said. You had Sulu and Uhura, you had an Asian guy, and you had a Russian guy, and a black woman, and then on top of that you had this Vulcan guy in this cast. And you had the Southern guy and the black woman, and nobody cared. I mean, things today that we look at as so mundane all those things were touching people, and then the story subject. So they didn't always hit, but there were some wonderful shows, and then some shows were just fun because they were great characters and great actors, and they had a great cast.
Join us next time when Larry goes on to talk about what he thinks the next generation's appeal was, and why he thinks Star Trek's optimism is due for a renaissance.